So give me just a few seconds and we'll get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's business building session. I'm Mike O'Neill with Bench Builders, and I'm going to be your host for today's Q&A session. Joining us today as expert panelist is Dr. Melissa Gratias with Progress Not Perfection. Hey, welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We also have my colleague Rhonda Beard again with us, and Rhonda's going to be updating us on what's happening in the real world out there and how that will likely be impacting employers. Rhonda, good to have you back. Good morning.
Good morning.
For those who are joining us for the first time, we launched these Q&A sessions to bring together experts like Melissa and Rhonda to help you as business owners, as key leaders, and HR professionals stay on top of what is important in order to do what you got to do to grow your business. To give you a little bit of sense of kind of the approach that we're going to take, the notes you see here is we really want to use this as an opportunity to hear from you. So what we want you to know is everybody who is registered will be getting an email, and that email will have a link to not only a recording of our time together, but also the slides that we're going to be using. And I think you're going to find the slides particularly helpful from today's session. But we very much want to hear from you. That is the Q&A format that we're going to be using. So if you haven't already, please open the chat box, and that is how we're going to be kind of interacting back and forth. I'm going to experiment with something. One of our past panelists, Kevin Monroe, introduced us to something. We're going to try something, and we're going to use that chat box really as the first time. And I like to use this to kind of ask a few questions of you, the participants. And so let me see if I can hit this and see if this is going to work. This is going to help Melissa and Rhonda kind of know how to gauge what they're going to be sharing. You should have a first question there, and I hope that is displayed there. We want to hear from you in the, I think, in chat box. First question, has COVID changed the percentage of time that you work from home? Has it changed the percentage of time? Please check either yes or no. And panelists, can you all do the same thing? Okay, we see how that's coming in. Good. And I can see some of you have gone ahead and answered questions 2 and 3, so feel free. It displayed all of them at once, so that's good. So the first question is, has it changed the percentage? And then it moves on. We're trying to get an idea of how much. Has it meant that you are now working 100% of the time remotely or something less? And then the question number 3 is, as a result of COVID, are you working less than 50% of the time? That gives an idea of what we have going on here. So it looks like, Melissa, Rhonda, it looks that 62% of the folks who've responded have said, yes, it has changed the amount of time they work from home. It's climbed now to 67%. It looks as if 73% are not working 100% of the time, but are working something less than 100. And then if I can scroll down, it looks as if that 73% are working less than 50% of the time. So let me see if I can do the math. It would appear that the folks who are with us today is almost 3/4 are working less than half of their time, but a large percentage of the folks have been impacted by COVID, and that will help us in our time together this morning. So I want to end the poll, and let me see if I can move this out of the way so I can see what is I'm supposed to be seeing here. But what I would like to do, if you don't mind, is I'd like to kind of give you a quick introduction of our guest panelists. And Dr. Gratias is going to be speaking on productivity and working from home and lessons from the past. And let me give you a little bit of introduction of Melissa. Dr. Melissa Gratias is she's a productivity specialist, but she readily admits she wasn't born organized. But she became organized through years of both self-education and trial and error. That is particularly early in her career. Melissa graduated from Wake Forest University using a weekly calendar, like many of us did, but she went on to eventually earn a PhD while working full-time as a corporate executive. Melissa decided that other business people, people like you on this Q&A session, shouldn't have to struggle with productivity like she did. And so in 2007, she opened her consulting firm. Since then, she's been very, very busy. She's written 6 books on productivity, an illustrated children's storybook on life balance. I hope we get a chance to talk about that a little bit. And she has coached and trained literally thousands of professionals to be more effective while at work. Dr. Gratias is an international speaker. She's a blogger. We know she's an author and a consultant, but she's also been recognized and been featured in Fast Company, on Inc.com, in Real Simple magazine, and on the Hallmark channel, just to name a few. So we're very excited to have Dr. Gratias with us, and I'm very happy to welcome Melissa, my friend. Good to have you with us today, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm really glad to be here. It's such an honor to be speaking to all of you today. I am talking about a topic about which I am very passionate. And working from home is something that, if there is a silver lining on this COVID cloud, it will be that in 6 months, we will have accomplished what it may have taken a generation to accomplish in terms of a cultural and attitudinal change toward working from home. So there's not many silver linings on this pandemic cloud, but that may be one of them. I also believe, and we will discuss this later, that the pandemic is going to forever change how we educate our children. But today, what I want to talk to you about is the past research on the working from home phenomenon. Working from home is nothing new, and it has been viewed over the years as something to be approached with caution, as something for people who only have children or sick parents. But as our workforce is changing and more millennials are entering our workforce in serious numbers and being promoted, we need to reevaluate our attitudes toward working from home, both as individuals and as employers. So I'll give you a couple of stories to start off. One is from my beloved, my husband. He is the chief medical officer for a healthcare company. Now, this is an organization that had already embraced the work from home phenomenon. They employ around 1,000 physicians, and the vast majority of those are remote workers. Now, why would his company have done that for so long? Well, it was a strategic advantage, because in order to recruit physicians out of practice, they needed to be able to offer these highly compensated employees something that they couldn't get elsewhere. So from a recruitment and retention standpoint, they employ physicians and say, you can work from home. Now, my husband started working for this company about 7 years ago, and he started off as one of those physicians working from home. And his claim to fame, I'm not kidding you here, was that for the first 3 months of his employment with this company, he didn't have to wear socks.
I'm sorry.
He was so proud. He was so proud. I have not worn socks in 3 months. So, and then, but if you think that workers who work from home are unpromotable, this is a case in point where you would be wrong, because now he's the top doc in the entire company. And he started out as a work from home worker. So this is a company that had already embraced the concept. And when COVID-19 hit earlier this year, I was so proud to watch my husband lead his organization going within the first 2 weeks of the quarantine, they had 96% of their workforce working from home. Even the big call centers, they had moved them out of the buildings and moved them to working from home. Within a month, it was 98%. So this is a company that had already embraced that, and they moved forward beautifully. By contrast, another client of mine is a law firm, large law firm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And they are more slowly embracing the work from home concept. They have said that the partners of the law firm still must come in 2 days a week, but they have set up the paralegals and legal assistants and a lot of these support staff to work from home. A more traditional way of working, law firms are very traditional, but they are still finding that they need to morph. So working from home has really hit some big numbers. And I'm going to give you a lot of research today. And here is the first. The first thing we know about working from home is, if my slide will advance, that would be excellent. All right, come on. There we go. This is a study from Komori and Lister called the Global Work from Home Experience Survey. And they completed it this year. It is self-report measures from a large sample, but the frequency that they have found of working from home pre-COVID and during, so this is our during right now, people who answered on a regular basis. Pre-COVID, it was 31%, now it's 88%. That almost trails with the poll that you just took, Mike.
It does.
And also, people who said they were working from home 5 days a week, it went from 9% to, look at this, 77%. So again, things that we would have never thought happened. It would have taken a generation, again, for these kind of percentage jumps we have accomplished in less than a year. And so we can expect as employers and as people that this is not, we're not going to go back to baseline. We're not going to revert to these pre-COVID numbers. These pre-COVID numbers are gone. They will not recur. It's not like everything's going to go back to, quote, normal. I think on your website, Mike, you call it America 2.0. I mean, that's fair enough. It's going to be Workforce America 2.0 here. And we're not going to go back to these pre-COVID numbers. So why were people initially concerned about this? Pre-COVID, these are just some concerns that my clients had expressed to me over the years. I've been a productivity coach since 2007. So I've seen a lot of changes in my client companies and my clients themselves. And I coach managers and executives as well as business owners. And a lot of them had the following concerns about working from home. Time wasting, that if you work from home, if someone works from home, they will have more opportunities to waste time. That they will feel lower engagement because they are not as connected to their colleagues. Additionally, there are concerns over overall lower productivity, fewer coaching and development opportunities, the expense, the flat out expense. And going back to the story about my husband, he said, I remember hearing him on the phone one day, he was talking to IT, he goes, "Do you have a stockpile of webcams? Because if you don't, I need you to buy some. And get those out, get your bulk discounts." So there is some expense in setting up home offices, dual screens and such. And there's the concerns they had was the importance of FaceTime. Now, there is still some beautiful things happen in was called MBWA, management by walking around. Some good things have happened over the years with MBWA and some collaboration and communication. But that MBWA, by the way, was a management technique formed in the 1950s. it was a valid strategy. This was pre-email. This was when people were still typing up memos. So hanging on to MBWA as a method of management is not going to be as effective, of course, in a post-COVID world. Additionally, a lot of my executive level clients still believe in the importance of in-person monitoring, of that big brother watching phenomenon for performance management. So all of these things have contributed to concerns about working from home, which is why we didn't have that much of it before COVID, okay? That's why these numbers are on the low side. But now we have more. So even, were these concerns valid? Okay, so let's just say, you know, these were our employer concerns. They thought all these things. Research has been done by some really great professors and people on the job to support the work from home phenomenon. First of all of this research on this slide was done prior to COVID, okay? So this is where we're trying to learn. It is a desirable employee benefit. In a day and age where our healthcare expenses are going up and up and up, and that is less of a benefit and more of a, oh goodness, what's gonna happen to us this year? Working from home is something that can be considered as a new benefit. And Gallup, who does tremendous amounts of research on employee engagement, says that engagement is actually improved by working from home. That flexibility is one of the highest ranked benefits by millennials. Now before, I'm gonna go ahead and put this out there. I hear a lot of unfortunate stereotyping of millennials, and some of the best research being done on millennials is being done by Dr. Jennifer Deal at the Center for Creative Leadership. Dr. Jennifer Deal at the Center for Creative Leadership. So if you really want to know about millennials, read her research in her book. What she has found is that millennials desire, above everything else, they want interesting work with good colleagues for fair pay and flexible working arrangements. I want that too. I'm in Gen X. So I'm not putting millennials out there as anything other than people who are willing to express the desires that we all have, okay? But they are the up and coming worker, and they are saying flexibility is one of the highest ranked benefits. And working from home is a way we can give that. Working from home overall saves money. Now, in a really seminal study by Bloom and Liang, they did a study of a call center, which people think call centers must be in these huge rooms where you can hear everyone talking behind them. You know a call center employee has called you as soon as you pick up the phone. But my husband's company and this Chinese company that Bloom and Liang studied found that in just 9 months, they saved over $1,900 per employee on just furniture and space. Just furniture and space, not to mention the improvements in engagement. It's a fascinating study to read. Because also they found that their performance of these call centers went up. They completed 13% more calls. It improves productivity. In my husband's company, he has found, because they measure performance like nobody's business. They have everything automated. I asked him and he said, productivity has been level pre to during COVID. Now that is considering that we are all completely stressed out, worried about the world and ourselves and our families, that we have children entering our offices, not unlike that BBC spot that we saw a few years ago where that poor man was doing the interview and his 3-year-old came dancing in the room. There's been so much going on, and yet in his company, productivity has been level. And he said that he thinks it's going to go up and up and up after the stress of the pandemic has passed. because their company will not be going back to pre-COVID levels. They're not going to be like, oh yes, we can pull all these people back. No, they will be changing how they work. So we have all these concerns, but research shows that a lot of them are not supported by data. So we need to learn from this. Now, I got an email from a client of mine at a very traditional manufacturing company and it's a company with whom I've worked for years. And this client sent me an email and said this: what was once impossible is now mandatory. And what he was referring to is that he had been asking to work from home for years, and it was deemed impossible. Can't do it. We can't make that work. We can't possibly have people working from home in this organization. What was once impossible is now mandatory. So here we are. We have had this tremendous culture and attitude change toward working from home. What can we learn from it? I've picked out 5 lessons, and Mike and Rhonda, if you want to pipe in here at any moment, please do so, because I would love for this to be a conversation. And anybody who has a question in the chat box, Mike, just read it out to me if you wouldn't mind, okay?
I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Lesson number 1, working from home is a cost-saving practice. Okay, working from home is a cost-saving practice. Komori and Lister found 2 things in their recent research this year. Desks are vacant in offices 50 to 60% of the time. When I was working for companies, about 7 years ago, I went through this, and I don't know if there's consultants out there, but you go through these phases of these particular types of jobs. And one of the phases that I went through was helping companies relocate and improve productivity during and after the relocation, doing things very strategically to improve productivity and making the office relocation not so much about the space, but about the people. So and the way we measured at that time with those projects, cost savings was per square foot cost of Class A office space. So we had, and we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, with desks that are vacant, 50 to 60% of the time, I want you to picture the square footage of a vacant space, of a vacant cubicle, of a vacant office, and picture the cost of that. Every time that it's vacant, that per square foot per month cost, you continue to pay that. So it's a cost, and working from home can be a cost-saving practice. What Komori and Lister found is that if you have people work from home and redeploy office space, okay? And by the way, you'll see later on, most people are willing to lose their dedicated desk in order to attain the benefit of working from home, okay? So just keep that in mind. If you're able to redeploy their space, then you can save $45,000 to $90,000 per year per 100 people, all right? Those are their cost estimates based on average cost per office space. I will tell you that, and again, I've been productivity coaching since 2007. The open concept or open workspace has been while it improves communication, it also makes interruptions pervasive. People just feel they are so unproductive. Whether that's accurate or not, people, I'm gonna say it, hate open concept workspaces because they can hear everything going around them. Everybody's talking over the cube walls. There's no delineation of space in some instances, and it's everybody walking around and talking to each other. people in those types of environments would be very, very happy to have a couple of days at home per week to do focused work. And that way, the space needs could be contracted considerably. It is cost saving. Really, the technology to set up a work from home space is not huge. And most of us have already invested that because of COVID. These technology needs are very doable. What you need is some telephony changes just to make sure the phones ring in the right place. Most people need either what my family teases me that I have a Jumbotron. I have this ginormous, I love my huge screen. It's just the best. They either need a Jumbotron screen or they need dual screens. And I'm not talking about open up your laptop on the side. I'm talking about legitimate dual screens, because laptop and desktops, it gets really confusing and you lose your mouse pointer about 30% of the time. I made that number up. But multiple screens, chat programs keep people connected to their coworkers, even if coworkers are not in the same building as them, and video equipment. Like my husband called IT and said, buy webcams in bulk, because if the webcam is embedded, by the way, in the laptop screen, you have to have your laptop open, which makes things complicated if you have a docking station. So I recommend employers, by the way, to have a separate webcam that they can hook onto the top of their Jumbotron. So, but the technology needs are very doable. And most of these technology needs have already been made right now. People have been set up to work from home. 77% of workers right now are set up. So if we're going to take advantage of that sunk cost, we need to start changing how we conceptualize desk space. If we do that, then work from home is a tremendous bottom line cost saving practice. Lesson 1, cost saving practice.
May I echo something just so you know? We've been very fortunate to have some great expert panelists, but 2 of the points you've made have been made prior on our webinar series. One of them, we had Beverly German. Her firm specializes in outfitting office environments, and she basically said the exact same thing. The cost savings to do what we're talking about are real. Now, there is some offset. For those who are at work, they have to retrofit their workspace, but at the same time, so that has been stressed. And then you mentioned the importance of technology, chat programs. Christina Hooper, who was also a prior panelist, introduced us to something that we were not using then, and that would be Slack as a means of communicating back and forth. So be comforted in knowing that what you've shared with us so far has already, we've heard from other experts saying the exact same thing. However, you did introduce me to a new term, telephony? Telephony? How do you say it? Telephony. Okay, I can't wait to use that sometime today. Telephony.
Absolutely.
All right,
absolutely.
Thank you. All right, sorry for interruption.
I'm here for you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, so all in all, even with the retrofitting, working from home can be a cost-saving practice. And this is something that employers will keep in mind over the next 3 to 5 years as they relocate and remodel existing offices. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think we're done with the days where in every company, everyone has their dedicated workspace with their nameplate on the outside. We need to be more nimble and flexible with our work. So if you take it from a holistic standpoint, over time, working from home is a cost-saving practice.
Could I ask a question? This came up from our friend Lulu Copeland,
Yes.
and I hope I'm reading what she's saying here, and that is she had observed, like all of us, how unproductive people can be in terms of people's time pre-COVID. In your experience, now that COVID's in place, there is a percentage of folks who are at traditional work. Do you have any sense of what's happened to their productivity now that they probably don't have as many people around them as those distractions you refer to?
The clients that I have worked with who are remaining on the job, they are saying because it is a ghost town around their workplaces, they are still being productive. I think that we can still take advantage of that post-COVID by having our workplaces not such hustling, bustling places of constant noise and distraction. And I believe, Lulu, that as you know, you work for an academic institution, we're going to be seeing more and more research come out about this. This is going to be the topic of organizational research for the next 10 years. I think with our world and how COVID changed us, I think it will be interesting to measure productivity levels pre, during, and post, and then factor that in by working from home versus working in the office. I don't have a tremendous sense, and the research is right now focused on the work from home phenomenon, but the anecdotal evidence that I have that people who are in the office still say it's just really nice to be alone. So there you go with that. So
Thank you.
Sure. Lesson number 2. And I'm a productivity specialist. Productivity is very important to me. Not that it's productivity at the expense of all else, but I believe if we are more productive at work, we can live the kind of life that we desire. And so but for employers, it is important to measure productivity. So the evidence is showing that limited that it is right now, because we are still in the middle of this, that work from home productivity levels are good. I'll skip to the last bullet and go up from there. In America, 85% of workers are fully productive working from home. Now, this is a self-report measure. So this is a self-report. Are you fully productive working from home? So 85% of people who are working from home perceive they are fully productive. Now that's, you might say, oh, totally biased, they may be lying, but this is thousands of employees, this is across lots of countries. I just took the results from America. And when people feel more engaged, that's called flow with a capital F, F-L-O-W. And it's a concept that was introduced by the researcher, wait for it, this is another word you can use today, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is
Thank
the
you.
researcher. There you go. That's just for you, Mike. But Dr. Csikszentmihalyi introduced the concept of flow, which is fully focused work, which is when you are in the groove, you're producing good things, you feel like you're doing your best work. In order for flow to occur, we must have the resources we need in front of us. We must be have set aside time to do the task, and we must be without distraction. So I look at this 85% number as people saying they are achieving flow with a capital F. And flow normally, the pre-COVID research on this is that only a third of the workforce had reported experiencing flow ever in their work. And now we have 85% of people saying they're fully productive. I think this is important. I think that working from home, when properly implemented and when properly equipped, can promote this great feeling of flow, which is not only great for the employer because of the productivity levels, but is phenomenal for the worker themselves. It leads to the highest levels of engagement and job satisfaction and feeling like you're doing good work. Flow is desirable. It's something that I've blogged about on my blog often because it's such an important concept. So 85% of workers are saying they're fully productive, and I'm taking that as a proxy measure of flow. Going up from there, the observer effect, it was originally called the Hawthorne effect. And the Hawthorne effect was a phenomenon observed in the early 1900s in research done in manufacturing organizations with women on the line, and they were lowering and raising the levels of light to see if that impacted workers' productivity. And the study has been debunked, which is part of the point of all this. And what they found is that no matter how low they made the lights in this manufacturing organization, the women on the line were working faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And to where they could barely see what they were doing, they were still working faster. And at the time, the researchers attributed it to the observer effect, to being watched. Now, more modern researchers have come back at this and said, observer effect is temporary. People eventually adapt to being watched and they go back to baseline productivity levels. So by Big Brother watching, you may get a temporary spike in productivity, but it will go back to baseline because people adapt to their circumstances. Additionally, so the observer effect, watching people as a way of performance management, is temporary. The second thing is it's untenable. What are we going to do? Pay all of our executives to go around and look at people? I mean, that's not what we pay executive level rates for. We pay them for their strategic thinking and for moving our organizations forward, not watch. We don't pay our managers to watch people. We pay them to manage performance. So the observer effect is not an effective way. So long and the short of it is, going back up to the first bullet, measure productivity as you normally would. And if you don't, have ways of measuring productivity. That's not a work from home problem. That problem, Rhonda, I think you'll agree, if you have no way of measuring productivity, you're gonna have that problem if everybody's in the office, right?
Yeah, well, you can't always measure productivity in an office either, so.
Yes, I mean, so what if you can't measure productivity or output or turnaround times or manage performance in the office, you're not going to be able to manage it at home when they're working from home. I mean, this is a context irrelevant phenomenon. You do need to measure productivity and manage performance. So working from home is not going to necessarily be the cause of productivity dips. Initially it may, because it's novel and new, and right now especially, things are weird. I mean, things are just plain weird. And productivity, and I think my husband's company, measuring productivity like they do, they're like, this is great that it's level, we're so happy, and they think it's going to go up after post-COVID. So lesson number 2 from the past is that productivity levels for workers from home are still good. We need to let go of the bias that if they're not under my purview, if I can't observe them, then I can't manage their performance. If I can't observe them, they'll goof off, for example. That's a very outdated management concept anyway. So lesson number 2, work from home productivity levels are good, if not better than in the office a lot of times. Lesson number 3, contrary to what we may believe, working from home has fewer time wasters. So Komori and Lister measured the external interruptions, the gotta minutes, the phone calls, the emergency meetings, that type of thing. In the office, 78 minutes per day were spent on these external interruptions. Now they don't go away when working from home, but they go down considerably to 43 minutes per day. I've seen this anecdotally with my clients as well. Meetings don't necessarily need to last the full hour. You know, it's almost as if when we get up out of our offices and walk across the building and plant ourselves in a conference room and all these people gather together, that we feel we need to make it worth it. Make it worth the walk by extending the meeting to the absolute limits and even beyond. Whereas in a Zoom meeting, it's not, we don't feel that we have wasted the walk. It's, we don't have to make it worth it, and people are willing to sign off before time ends. That is what I have seen from my clients. And once we get used to the technology and the big joke of seeing everybody like in the Brady Bunch boxes, then it becomes a rich conversation that can be had in a more efficient fashion. Now, in 2013, Salary.com did a study, of wasting time at work, which I think is really interesting for them to measure and report to their clients. And as you can see, there's lots of reasons why employees waste time at work. And when I say wasting time at work, I'm talking about surfing the web for news, getting on social media, and even playing computer games while at work, or getting sucked into a YouTube, portal. But of the people who were doing this, of the people who had said, yes, I have wasted time at work, it was because of these types of reasons: being not challenged, almost trying to compensate for working long hours by taking back some time. They felt there was no incentive to work harder, which is a performance management issue. They are unsatisfied with their work. They're just plain bored with what they have to do, and low wages. Some people even said low wages. Again, these are things that will happen whether you are all together in an office, and this was done in 2013. So this is, when work from home was still a twinkle in our eyes. So this happens on the job. So I don't think we can blame or point to work from home as a culprit of time wasting at work. And what we actually find is that, contrary to thinking work from home is more of a time waster, research is showing this year that working from home actually leads to people working more hours than they did in the past. First of all, there's the commute savings. Rescue Time says people are on average saving almost an hour a day. And think about, I grew up in Atlanta. That would be more like 2 hours, 3 hours a day. And Kamori and Lister found that people are using almost half of their commute time as additional work time. So what was once spent on the road, half of which is now being spent on the job. So more work hours. Also, there are fewer and shorter meetings. Meetings are a lot of times, from what I hear from my executive clients, I'm in meetings 80% of the day. I'm in meetings 80% of the day. Now, executives, that will happen. The higher you go in our organization, the more meetings you will need to attend. But when you are working from home, even as an executive, you will have 1 to 5 hours per day of savings, of time savings, meetings being shorter, meetings being fewer. And because we get into a rhythm of meetings, they almost become a social event when everybody is together in a building. So fewer and shorter meetings. Rescue Time has found they're decreasing now. And I would put forth that that doesn't necessarily result in less communication, but it's more efficient use of meeting time and more thoughtful called meetings. Just putting more thought into calling meetings. So that may be Pollyanna of me. I'm sure there is some loss of communication, but generally fewer and shorter meetings, if the time is appropriately used, is a good thing and allows for more productivity and work hours.
Melissa, you mentioned using the time appropriately. I hate to do this, but I'm looking at what we've got time-wise, and we've got some questions coming in. So I know you've got at least another point. I'd like to get some of these questions while we're together today.
Please do.
So go ahead. If I know you had at least another point. You had 5 lessons.
Thank you for the nudge. I appreciate it. Lastly, on more work hours, although we are having a blur between work and home hours, people are able to work more hours when they just have to commute to their home office. Kamori and Lister have found that people working from home are not burning out to the same extent that people are working from the office. People working from home have greater perceptions of well-being and balance. All right, last lesson. Working from home, and this is the reality, is not for everybody. It's not for everybody. Kamori and Lister found that self-discipline is a big predictor of work from home success. I would put forth that if you use a validated personality test such as the Big Five, that has a personality factor called conscientiousness, that could measure people who are more likely to be successful working from home. I would also put forth that although we are likely not to go back to the 5 days mandatory working from home work week post-COVID, we are going to be having more people want to work from home, probably about 2 days a week on average. And workers are willing to give up their assigned workspace to be able to work from home. But lastly, I think that it's important to note that in addition to high levels of conscientiousness and wanting to work from home, allowing people to self-select into the work from home experience, having a dedicated home office is also very important and supported by research to improve productivity levels. So thank you so much for letting me go over a bit on time, and I would love to answer some questions.
Well, let me do that. Let me go back to our screen here, and I have to reopen up my chat box to get to those. So let me, I may go kind of in order.
Sure.
Carol asked, you've got new employees. Hiring is going on, so there's need to onboard them. Your advice on how to onboard someone when they're going to be working remotely, does that not present a whole new set of challenges?
It presents a whole new way of thinking about onboarding.
Mm.
And my one of my client companies is doing some major hiring right now. And they have reconfigured their onboarding process. They assign a buddy to the new employee that is also working from home, someone that is their point of contact, that they have technology, or someone in a similar position. They have an onboarding buddy. They have moved all of the training that used to be done, the onboarding training that used to be done in a room with a bunch of people looking really bored. They've done it online, made it more interactive and a more modern approach. It can be done as long as we make sure that the infrastructure is in place for this person to have connection to others in the organization, to person to whom they're reporting, and to peers who can help answer their questions. That's what I've seen happening. And it's going quite well for that organization.
You mentioned connection. Brian Rutberg asked, he is acknowledging, like me, that he's prone to distraction. And that is, he's asking, what specific suggestions do you have to help him, to help me, help others who have the same issue, stay focused when you're in a familiar environment like working from home, and not get distracted by all the things that need to be done around the house that you've been putting off?
Well, okay, I'm laughing right now because this is going to be a shameless promotion of my free webinar. I have put a free webinar out that it talks about mitigating interruptions. Interruptions are caused by two things: the external interruptions, as I mentioned in the slides, that are decreasing, and internal interruptions. And I have put together for that purpose a 35-minute free webinar that if you'll just email me, you see my email address on the last slide, I will send you the link for it, that talks about how to mitigate those internal interruptions. And I'll go ahead and give you one tip from that webinar. The Pomodoro method, if you've never heard of it, is a method of using timers and dedicated sprints of productivity to help you feel accountable and motivated toward doing things without interruption. And I go over the Pomodoro method, and you can look it up also online. It's a great way of keeping yourself on track in the midst of all these thoughts that are going through your head. I need to check the laundry. I need to empty the dishwasher. The Pomodoro method is giving yourself permission to focus solely on the task at hand for these 25 minutes intervals of sprints that are punctuated by 5-minute breaks in between, during which you are permitted to go check the laundry, to go empty the dishwasher, that type of thing. I think the Pomodoro method is a wonderful way to work, especially when you're working from home.
Very helpful. You've got a fellow Hokie who's asked the question. Joe is kind of concerned about, how do you maintain a culture building environment? Matter of fact, I got some more questions, so it moved on here. He writes, What advice do you have for continuous improvement, which is always a challenge in organizations, and the sustainment of company culture while you're transitioning to work from home? And that is, how do you really infuse culture when people are not together physically?
That, I think, is a misconception. And that is part of one of the things that has held us back for years from the work from home phenomenon. Culture is transmitted remotely. Is it transmitted as strongly? Maybe, maybe not. But the one word answer to this is video. That it is so critical for us to have video conferencing, video meetings, and not just audio. We've seen the YouTube parodies of conference calls where everybody's beeping in and talking over each other. Having the video and the Brady Bunch screen, boy, I'm really aging myself with that, but the Brady Bunch screen of all the faces, that allows for the nonverbal communication, that allows for the transfer of culture. I've seen, my husband's company has been doing this for years, and they have a very strong and robust company culture. It can be done remotely. But video is required, in terms of technology and intention, and making sure that people are paired off and people are getting the appropriate attention that they need in a remote distance environment.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left, so I want to squeeze in a couple more things. One more question I'm going to ask you, Melissa, and then I want to ask Rhonda to speak, and that is, you mentioned the Gallup poll.
Yes.
And I know this is conjecture on your part, but what do you think is going to be Gallup's findings as a result of more people working from home in terms of how happy they are in their job?
Well, the best predictor of the future is the past. And in the past, Gallup has found that working from home leads to higher engagement. So I think they're going to find higher engagement levels in an organization. And I will tell you, in one of my client companies, they use the Gallup employee engagement survey in their company. They did it, they compared it 2019 and just finished 2020. Wow, what a time to do an employee engagement survey. Engagement is significantly improved. In the midst of all this crazy, they have found that engagement that's just one organization, but engagement has improved as a result of all this work from home, I think.
Melissa, you've been providing such good information. Rhonda and I, while you were speaking, were kind of chatting back and forth, and we made a decision. We're going to let you keep doing what you're doing. Rhonda, however, she'd like to kind of tease up something that she's going to be covering next week. So Rhonda, if you would share with the folks who are participating today, if they sign up for next week, what might they be hearing from you next week?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And Melissa, absolutely great information. Some of this we've touched on in previous webinars, but a lot of your statistics and studies definitely drive home a lot of the things I think that people are feeling and thinking, but now we're seeing it and it's real. So great information. I know one of the questions on here was, what advice do you have for dual income couples who are working from home and have kids at home that are out of school or daycare is closed? And we've talked about some of that in the past, but what we really want to get more focused on right now is school's about to reopen. And that's creating a whole bunch of new anxieties and uncertainties for people. So on top of COVID and health and figuring out if you're at work or at home, or if your family's healthy, and we have the political environment and the protesting, and now we have parents who, whether they're working at home or in the office, they have kids going back to school, and most people don't even know what that's going to look like yet because schools haven't decided. It may be in person, it may be virtual, it may be some combination, it may be a phased in plan. And I've always said, and I've heard many parents I've talked to this week that have said, don't schools recognize that parents work? Because school systems are definitely not planning things around parents. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about what you as employers can do to help your employees with these uncertainties that they have. And certainly telecommuting and flexible work options are part of it, but just allowing people to work at home doesn't necessarily take care of that problem for them, because if they're working at home and their kids are at home in school, it doesn't work. It just does not work effectively. And it's more stressful for people at times. So I think everybody wants kids to go back to school. Kids want to go back to school, but there's still the question of how safe that's going to be. And a lot of schools have not made decisions yet. So we'll talk more next week about some things that as companies and employers and managers you can do to help ease some of that pressure and anxiety for your employees that are dealing with that.
Well, between now and next week, there may be more answers coming out of the school systems because the time to make those decisions is now, and school systems are having to make tough decisions now. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that next week. Just to kind of remind folks, we've already asked Steve Hillis to be our expert panelist next week. Steve is a sales executive who has managed large sales teams. He was so good, he's opened a consulting firm to advise organizations on how to develop sales strategies and how to go execute on these sales strategies even in this type of COVID environment. So we're mindful that we've got folks on this Q&A session who are not only in the HR profession, but they also own their businesses. They probably have responsibility for sales as well. So we hope that you will join us next week to hear not only from Steve on that topic, but also from Rhonda from what she is going to cover. I'm going back to this contact information because, Melissa, I was writing down as you were talking a number of things. You, in your slide deck, gave us a lot of good, solid information. So what I would invite people to do is you will be receiving, as a participant in this, everybody who's done so, a link that has not only the recording, but the slides that you've seen Melissa. And so if you want to go back and look more into some of the research studies that she referred to, she's got those citations there so you can go back and do that. You mentioned about being in the flow and the importance of flow. It's hard to believe that we have zipped through the amount of time we have. Matter of fact, my clock is saying it's the top of the hour, so I want to be respectful to everybody who has taken the time to join us. Melissa, on behalf of Rhonda and I, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was a joy to both do this research and speak about it today to your clients and colleagues.
And Rhonda, looking forward to hearing more about the impact that returning to school is going to have on employers. So if I could, on behalf of Bench Builders, thank you for taking the time to be with us this week. We hope you'll join us next week, and we wish you a very blessed day. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.